Another gold for Team GB as Charlotte Dujardin triumphs in the dressage, retaining her Olympic title.
Here's the real test now. We're on.
And she passes the test with flying colours on her horse Valegro to become only the second British woman in history to win 3 Olympic golds.
I have just had the best ride. I mean, I've just gone out there and Valegro has given me absolutely everything. I felt so emotional doing the last bit. We've just come out there, we've all had a cry, you know.
Team GB now has 16 goals after Andy Murray's hard-fought win rounded off an extraordinary weekend of success for British athletes. In hot pursuit, Mark Cavendish is chasing his first Olympic medal, but will it be gold? We'll be asking what's behind the British success also tonight. The former Premier League footballer Dalian Atkinson has died after a taser was fired at him by police in Shropshire. Fighting radical Islam, Donald Trump says he'd introduce extreme vetting, banning immigrants from certain regions if he becomes president. Europe's forgotten war. Russia calls for calm after the latest flare-up with Ukraine over Crimea.
In the south, the latest from the region's athletes at Rio, plus an accident waiting to happen. Calls for the A34 to be made safer. And the long way home for festival goers after 80 vehicles were destroyed in the Boomtown blaze.
Good evening. Britain's Charlotte Dujardin has 1 gold on her horse Valegro in the individual dressage, defending her Olympic title and making her only the second British woman in history to win 3 Olympic golds. Her win continues the extraordinary run of success for Team GB over the weekend, which saw Britain add 5 more Olympic golds to its tally. And there could be more to come tonight with cyclist Mark Cavendish, who's in action. From Rio, here's our correspondent Andy Swiss.
It's been described as equestrian ballet, and these are its ultimate performers. Charlotte Dujardin and Valegro, rider and horse, in perfect harmony. This will be Valegro's last games, and at the end, the emotions overflowed.
They have been the stars of the sport worldwide now.
A 3rd Olympic title for Dujardin after a near flawless display.
You know, London, I had no expectation, no pressure to go out there. Today I felt a huge amount of pressure and expectation, and for me, I really, you know, it could be one of the last rides on Valegro. You know, there is the talk of retirement for him, so for me to finish it in this way, it's a really emotional time.
There was also success in the women's hammer, Sophie Hitchen with her very final throw. That was enough for bronze, Britain's first ever medal in the event. Earlier, a sensational Sunday featuring 5 British golds had been rounded off by Andy Murray. His win over Juan Martín del Potro leaving both men physically and emotionally drained. Murray proud on the podium, the first player to win back-to-back singles golds.
I feel a lot of just relief, and I'm just tired right now, but obviously very proud to have won another gold medal.
In the gymnastics, meanwhile, proof that no one is perfect. Simone Biles, could you believe it, making a mistake.
Now that will definitely be a deduction.
3 golds so far, but no 4th on the beam. The American's still a star of these games, but this time only bronze. Elsewhere, another medalist got rather more than she bargained for. Chinese diver He Ji receiving a very public marriage proposal from teammate Qin Kai. And to the delight of the crowd, she said yes. 2 divers taking the plunge in a whole new way. But for Team GB and this evening, Mark Cavendish, more hopes of a medal in the Omnium, cycling's answer to the heptathlon. This moved him up to silver position with just 1 race left. Could it be another glittering night?
Well, I can tell you that final race is now underway, some 160 laps, and already we've had drama. Mark Cavendish involved in a crash. He is okay, but other riders are out. One had to be stretchered off. Cavendish is currently in bronze medal position. We should know the result in the next 20 minutes, Sophie.
Andy, thank you. Well, one of the big stars of these Olympics, Usain Bolt, will be back in action tomorrow as he begins his bid for an 8th Olympic gold medal in the 200 metres. Last night, he proved he is still the fastest man in the world by winning gold in the 100 metres for the 3rd Olympics in a row. Our sports editor Dan Roan reports.
3 games, 3 golds. Usain Bolt's sprint supremacy continues. Olympic 100 metres champion yet again.
Gatlin gets away well, and Bolt just left a little bit in the blocks. It's Gatlin leading it at the moment, and Gatlin is charging. But here comes Usain Bolt, and Bolt is going to take it. Usain Bolt gets it!
Bolt started slowly in Rio, but the man cast as athletics saviour soon surged to glory, going to a place no one in Olympic history had been before and affirming his status as a true legend of this and of all sport. But for once, he may have been outstaged. 24-year-old South African Wade van Niekerk producing one of the most spectacular pieces of running the sport had ever seen in the final of the 400 metres.
Van Niekerk takes it, and it is a new world record!
17 years ago, the great Michael Johnson ran the 400 metres in a time that many thought would never be beaten.
World record beckons, and it's gone!
Today he told me Van Niekerk could follow in Bolt's footsteps.
He could be the next superstar of this sport. It doesn't diminish Usain Bolt at all. We love to compare people and that sort of thing, but those were 2 fantastic performances last night that we were treated to, and for very different reasons.
With the build-up to these Olympics being dominated by a doping-related scandal, what Usain Bolt and Wade van Niekerk achieved here last night when they crossed this line will have come as a huge relief to organisers, shifting the focus and giving these games the iconic moments they craved.
No one was more thrilled by Van Niekerk's performance last night than his coach, 74-year-old great-grandmother Anna Botha. Today the pair able to reflect on a night athletics will never forget.
I've always believed that I could do it. I think I had my doubts this championships, but the Lord has been so great to me, and I'm so thankful for what happened.
It's unbelievable. It's I can't put it in words. It's such a mixture of feelings, and on the one side you're on a high, and on the other side you want to cry, and you know it's a bit difficult to explain what's going through your mind.
Even Bolt was struck by what he'd seen last night, interrupting his celebrations to congratulate Van Niekerk, the old master and the new hero sharing centre stage. Olympic sport grateful for both. Dan Roan, BBC News, Rio.
The BBC has been told that as many as 50 countries may have to cancel plans to compete at the Rio Paralympics next month because millions of pounds in travel grants haven't been paid. It's been suggested that the funds may have been spent on dealing with last-minute problems in Rio. The money was meant to have been paid by the Rio 2016 Local Organising Committee to the International Paralympic Committee at the end of July. Let's have a look now at the medal table so far on day 10, and in the lead still is the USA with 26 gold medals. But after the weekend's success, Great Britain has moved up into second place with 16 golds, 16 silvers and 8 bronzes, taking our total tally to 40. That's just 8 short of Team GB's official target. The former Aston Villa striker Dalian Atkinson has died after a taser was fired at him by police in Shropshire. Officers were called to his father's home in Telford in the early hours of the morning after they were alerted about concerns for the safety of a man. The 48-year-old suffered a cardiac arrest as he was being taken to hospital. The Independent Police Complaints Commission is investigating the incident. Sian Lloyd reports.
For more than 16 years, Dalian Atkinson was a household name in top-flight football. The striker played for a number of clubs, but is perhaps best known for his time at Aston Villa and this memorable performance against Wimbledon in 1992. It earned the title of Match of the Day Goal of the Season.
By Dalian Atkinson.
He was a well-known visitor to this cul-de-sac near Telford where his father lived. At 1:30 this morning, officers were called to the property. West Mercia police have confirmed that a taser was used. Paramedics said Dalian Atkinson suffered a heart attack on his way to hospital. Paula Quinn lives in a flat overlooking the street. She told me what she saw happen.
Initially I heard a car alarm going off and then I heard shouting, so I was up and about. I looked out the window and immediately I saw two police officers shouting to an African gentleman in the street. The gentleman stumbled forward, so he obviously was still moving forward, and they tasered him around the midriff.
She then went on to make this claim.
Police officers that were there, the only ones that were there, sort of scrambled in towards him and started kicking him around the body. That's all I can hear is the boots hitting him.
She's the only person we know of to have made these claims. Officers have spent most of the day here speaking to neighbours.
Understanding what the situation is.
Dalian Atkinson's nephew told us that his uncle had kidney problems and had been undergoing dialysis. He'd heard the news about his uncle's death from a friend at work.
It's inevitably angry, frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, overwhelmed.
What are the questions that are going around in your head today?
Because the damage is done, so you've got to try and develop preventatives through this. For example, that's why I say if as soon as they deploy a taser, you've got to deploy an ambulance.
Police tasers were first introduced in 2003 as an alternative to the use of lethal force. Since then, it's been found their use played a significant or material part in the deaths of 2 men. The Independent Police Complaints Commission says it's currently investigating 4 cases where a taser was used prior to death. This evening, the police cordon has been lifted, and I can see that glass in the front door of the property has been broken. The Independent Police Complaints Commission investigates cases like this as a matter of course. It says that a full inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the former footballer's death has already begun and will include looking at the use of force. Many questions are being asked about how Dalian Atkinson died. An inquest will determine to what extent the taser played a part. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Telford.
The Republican Donald Trump says he will fight what he calls radical Islamic terrorism if he becomes president by introducing extreme vetting, banning immigrants from certain parts of the world from entering the US. In a speech tonight, he said there'd be a new ideological test for admission to the US, which would vet applicants on issues like religious freedom. Our chief correspondent Gavin Hewitt reports now from Washington.
This was billed as a major speech. How Donald Trump would fight radical Islam if he became president of the United States. He said there would be no more attempts to change regimes in the Middle East.
If I become president, the era of nation building will be brought to a very swift and decisive end.
He spoke of finding common ground with Russia in the fight against the so-called Islamic State, and he also said he would use ideological warfare, including shutting down access to the internet. But his toughest comments related to immigration into the United States. He said he would temporarily stop immigration from some of the most dangerous regions of the world.
In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. I call it extreme vetting. Our country has enough problems. We don't need more, and these are problems like we've never had before.
This speech was intended to revive his flagging presidential campaign.
When Donald Trump spoke of an extreme ideological screening test for migrants, what he didn't do was to provide any details. He did say that those who hoped to come to America had to prove that they shared America's values. And he went on to say that he himself, if he became president, would fight the so-called war on terror viciously if necessary. Certainly amongst his core supporters and those who were listening to him, they liked what they heard. How this will play more widely and amongst independent voters in the United States, that's more difficult to judge, Sophie.
Gavin, thank you. A brief look now at some of the day's other news stories. And workers at Sports Direct's Derbyshire base will receive back pay totalling around £1 million after the retailer admitted not paying the national minimum wage. The Unite union said the payments, backdated to May 2012, could be worth up to £1,000 for some workers. A law firm that brought claims alleging misconduct by British troops during the Iraq War is to close. Public Interest Lawyers was stripped of access to state legal funding for its cases earlier this month. The Defence Secretary Michael Fallon has described the move as the right outcome for our armed forces. Russia has appealed for calm after the latest flare-up with its neighbour Ukraine over the annexed territory of Crimea. Both countries have been in bitter dispute over the peninsula after Russia took control 2 years ago. The conflict over Crimea between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian forces has killed nearly 10,000 people. Last week, Moscow accused Kiev of armed attacks into the region. Our correspondent Tom Burridge sent this report from the Ukrainian border.
This is how a summer holiday here starts or ends. This is not an international border for much of the world. Everyone here is Ukrainian. Their homes, hotels or family on the other side in Russian-controlled Crimea. After Russian claims of a Ukrainian-inspired plot there, relations between the two countries have hit a new low. Russia's security agency, the FSB, claims hidden explosives in its video here were intended for targets in Crimea. Ukraine says the whole story is a fake. This FSB video shows one of the accused, Yevgeny Panov.
It's too official language, too official.
The way he talks.
Yeah.
His brother believes he's talking under duress and shows signs of torture in another FSB film, and says the idea that he was in a special forces team sneaking into Crimea is preposterous.
Physically, he couldn't do it. Zhenya has overweight. He has a hard knee injury and hard breath. He is a victim of a big political action.
Truth or fake, Ukraine has put its military on high alert after Russia said it would respond. But in the Ukrainian region next to Crimea, few fret.
The atmosphere here in southern Ukraine is relaxed because the idea of Russian military action here, just across the water from Crimea, is on paper at least unlikely. The increase in tension and rhetoric from Moscow is probably part of a wider strategy.
Russia has moved surface-to-air missiles onto Crimea. The S-400 can shoot down a plane 400 kilometers away. At the end of last week, the Russian Navy held drills to deal with saboteurs in Crimea, and more Russian war games began today in the eastern Mediterranean. Crimea's administrative border disrupts Ukrainian lives. Ratcheting up the tension here destabilizes the country. In the south of Ukraine, calm. But after Russia's annexation of Crimea more than 2 years ago, Ukraine and its allies like Britain have learnt to expect the unexpected. Moscow's strategy is rarely crystal clear. Tom Burridge, BBC News in Kherson, southern Ukraine.
And finally, back to the Olympics now. And after the weekend's medal haul, Rio is shaping up well for Team GB. London 2012 was their best ever medal haul, finishing third with a total of 65 medals. 4 years before that, they picked up 47 medals in Beijing, 30 at the Athens Games, 28 in Sydney, while in Atlanta in 1996, Great Britain went home with just 15 medals and only 1 gold. So what's behind the big turnaround? Natalie Perks reports.
For Great Britain, they've smashed the world record. Bow to his superiority, Mo Farah wins the gold.
Records tumbling, history being made. These games have so far surpassed all expectations. And it's all thanks to an injection of cash and one humiliating Olympics. In 1996 in Atlanta, there was just one gold medal, Redgrave and Pinsent, in the men's coxless pairs. A year later, the government started diverting lottery funds directly into sport, meaning athletes could train full-time. For those here now, their medals are the direct result of that decision.
The funding is everything. I mean, I don't get any extra money other than the lottery money, so that is it. You know, without that, you're not windsurfing, you're not going to the Olympic Games, you're not competitive in any Olympic sport.
So just how much cash has been spent since Atlanta? There was a £69 million investment for the Sydney Games, but by Athens, the investment had gone up. London won the right to host the Olympics, and 3 years later in Beijing, there was a huge increase in funding to £265 million. For London, that was up again, and it paid off. Britain finished third in the medal table at their home games. Here, the total investment in both the Olympic and Paralympic teams is almost £350 million, with the team on course for its best away games in history. UK Sport say this success is by design, not chance.
We've enjoyed the privilege of National Lottery investment now for 18 years, and what that's allowed UK Sport to do is to focus and funding in a very targeted way and allow athletes to live and train full-time, 8-year investments, not a 4-year project, with the very best world-class coaching, science, medicine support wrapped around them.
Well, it's not just the traditional sports like cycling and rowing which have excelled. Diving and gymnastics have had an excellent game. Swimming has posted its best performance at an Olympics since 1908. Your weekly National Lottery flutter is directly influencing the medal table.
Max Whitlock takes gold.
Ultimately, though, funding only provides the foundations. It's the athletes who must deliver the inspiration. So far at these games, Team GB is spoiling a nation which no longer hopes, it expects. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Rio.
And just time to tell you of more Olympic success. In the last few minutes, Britain's Mark Cavendish has won a silver medal in the men's omnium, his first Olympic medal. That's it from us. Good night.